Welcome to the Blue Mind podcast. We have a vision to change the lives of 1 billion men.
And we invite people here to discuss important issues that affect men in today's society.
Every 6 minutes in the United Kingdom, somebody takes their life through suicide. Today we welcome Steve Phillip onto the Blue Mind podcast. Steve has gone through every parent's worst nightmare, losing his son Jordan to suicide 2 years ago. We're delighted to welcome Steve on today to talk about his campaigning for suicide prevention.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ed Bassett from Blue Mind, and I've got the huge pleasure today of having Steve Phillip with me. Hope I've got your name right, Steve.
Well done, actually. Yes, I've already been called Phil once today.
Phillip,
so thank you for that, Ed. That's a great start.
Okay, well, we can end on a high. So I met Steve a few weeks ago now on LinkedIn, and Steve is here to talk about an extremely meaningful and important topic, which we'll get into in a minute. And I think at that stage, I think it's great to have you on. It's a huge privilege, in fact, to have you on, and listeners will find out why shortly. And perhaps you can introduce yourself, Steve, where you live and what you've been up to in your life, and then we'll talk about something which is incredibly important to men and women, and that's the subject of suicide. So welcome, Steve. Nice to have you on.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. And yeah, a little bit of background, as your viewers will see via YouTube if they're watching this. I'm clearly not a millennial or anywhere near that kind of age group. A man of mature years, we'll say. But yeah, I mean, I have a career, some 30 odd years working in consultancy, leadership and management training, and over the more recent kind of 11 years around my own coaching practice and training company and speaking business, which was predominantly around helping large and small businesses make the most of platforms such as LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter. So these could be companies from FedEx to Harley Davidson to smaller kind of startup businesses as well. And that was really my background for many years. And it was back in 2019, I was actually working with a large automotive group in the Midlands in the UK. Just delivered a Facebook workshop for some of the managers there. A long day, but a good day. Got into my car ready for about a 3.5 hour journey back home to North Yorkshire and Harrogate here. When a call came in on the phone, I'd literally just put it onto the dashboard as it came in. And it was from my son's partner and girlfriend, Charlotte. And, if you could describe what happens over the next kind of 2 minutes of that phone call, which is what it was logged as. I've said many times, I can remember the first kind of 15, 20 seconds really, as she told me through, real distress that my son Jordan had taken his own life. He'd just come home and to his house and found him. And, from that moment onwards, my kind of life unraveled and changed out of all recognition, really.
Sure. So, I mean, it's incredibly difficult to know where to go next with a conversation like this. And this is half the taboo, perhaps, for many people, particularly men, is that it's so uncomfortable. I'm a father of two. I cannot imagine, and I'm sure I echo anybody, even people without children. I think to put ourselves in your shoes, horrifying is the only word I can think of, and I can't think you ever get over it. And that's not me being overly dramatic. So I want to ask that question, and I, rather than getting to the end result, we have to look at this as a positive. We're talking to you to open the discussion, but actually to make a difference for not only for people thinking about this, but how practically we can assist. So you have, from what I see from Jordan's website and the work you're doing, you have turned something of a tragedy into as positive as you can. Can you talk me through then, maybe, 2022 now, January, this was December 19, is that right?
That's right.
So can you perhaps talk me through, without dwelling too much on the past? We obviously want to get onto the future and we want to talk about helping people, but perhaps you can those first few days, weeks, can you try and articulate that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. From a personal point of view, obviously a huge amount of trauma going on, within the family. Physically, I obviously suffered some after effects, what we might refer to as PTSD, I suppose, and there were physical traumas, head twitching, other physical issues that would manifest themselves as a result of the trauma that I was going through. But very quickly, and this might be again a man thing, I don't know, but it very quickly dawned on me that somebody had to probably take control of the situation and what was going on. You have police to deal with, coroners, funeral arrangements, personal affairs. Nobody was really in a position or a state to be able to take that on. So I think it kind of fell to me to take that on, and so even things like such was the mess and the aftermath. We didn't even know where Jordan was in the first few days. The police, we couldn't get hold of the police officer we needed to speak to, was on the scene, and so we were going through this kind of nightmare of suddenly a bereaved family to suicide, not knowing what on earth you're supposed to do, no guidance, no support of any kind at that point. And so dealing with all that in the first few weeks, and it was very soon afterwards, and I was talking with a good friend of mine, and he said, no, you're kind of going to want to document all this. You're going to want to write down what's going on, not least so you can just keep track of everything that's happening, but you might want this, he said, because look, you've got a couple of choices really here. You've got the choice of sitting on a sofa now with a bottle. That's one choice, and I know you feel like that, and I did, absolutely. Or you've got a choice to try and turn this around somehow and get out there. And he said, I kind of know, and I'm pretty certain I know what you will do when the time's right. And it was literally 3 weeks after Jordan's death that I kind of had been writing a lot of stuff down, feeling a lot of emotions and anger, and I just wanted to get and share what was going on. And I published this article on LinkedIn. No great expectations, even though LinkedIn was kind of my platform of choice. But the response was huge. It was global. With people such as Ariana Huffington from the HuffPost emailing me, and people from psychologists to people who'd lost loved ones to then people who themselves were struggling. And I think when I chose to publish that article, in the back of my mind, the reason behind it was that if someone else reads this, that's kind of considering, in my naivety, not knowing anything really about mental health then or suicide, in my naivety, it was if someone reads this and is considering taking the same path Jordan did, and the sheer horror of what I'm sharing here, if that's enough to kind of put them off, then kind of job done really. And it did. And I received those messages from people saying, I've just read your story, I just can't do this, to my family or my loved ones. And that kind of started the journey really, Ed, from there to, because I started to get so many responses, I didn't know then in turn for the ones that were struggling what I should be saying to them.
Yes, because you weren't qualified.
Not qualified. I'm not a mental health professional, but we did have expertise, and somewhat ironically, in many ways, we had Jordan's mother, my ex-wife, we're on very good terms, but was a senior psych nurse, had been for many years. And Jordan's own girlfriend was just putting a dissertation in to become a qualified clinical psychologist. So we had kind of the expertise, and that is equally a positive thing, but you can imagine what's going through their minds with that level of knowledge and expertise, and yet we lose someone in the family so close to suicide.
I mean, I have to go. I mean, I have to ask, and I guess a lot of people ask the same question, is there was no signs from what I've read, although there was some depression I think Jordan suffered from in the past, but there wasn't nothing that you thought it had reached that level where that would happen. Is that a fair comment?
No, I think that's a good description, Ed. I think I now look back and I see the signs. But and one of the reasons why I do what I do now is to try and educate people to be more aware of what the signs are. Some of them now are blatantly obvious. At the time, with the knowledge that I had, they weren't really. So he'd been diagnosed. Jordan had been diagnosed in 2015 with clinical depression and anxiety, but in all other respects managed it, reasonably well. He held down a good job. He worked with the Independent Office of Police Conduct as an officer, and with the Home Office in immigration prior to that. He had a lovely house, lovely girlfriend, huge circle of friends.
Yeah.
He was the guy at the party, that was light up the room. Yeah, everything, that I've heard time and time again.
Incredibly kind, humble, loving guy, and something we can maybe explore. I mean, incredibly sensitive to other people's needs and emotions. And I think there's how do I phrase this? I think the people that feel things the most are often the most vulnerable.
I think you're right. I think what I have learned is that those that are struggling at that kind of level are so much more in tune with others who are struggling because they get it. I think that was very much the case with Jordan. He'd be the first to hop in a car to go and drive 100, 200 miles for a friend who is struggling, and kind of be there because I think he got it, really. So I think, what happened from there, Ed, was that very soon I realized that I needed some knowledge to be able to respond to all these people. And we kind of discussed as a family how we did that. But I also was starting in my own mind to think, my life's going to change now. I can't continue doing this consultancy and training and everything that I've done.
Yes.
I have to make some sense out of all this for me. That's probably what some of it was. And I have to try and see if I can stop this happening to other people. And it's not unusual for that kind of response, reaction with many others, that I've spoken to and met with who've been in that situation. And it was really out of that thought process that the Jordan legacy was born, really.
Sure. And I mean, I one question I do have, I mean, I guess from my, if I try and for a second put myself into your shoes, and it's terrifying to think of it, and I don't think any dad or mum can it's your worst nightmare, I think it's fair to say. And I guess the question I would ask is that feeling of, I wish I'd have known, or should I have known, could I have done something? And it's a difficult question to ask. And I think anybody in this situation, even to have children that are diagnosed with depression, you want to protect your kids amongst anything. And, I would jump into a fire for mine if I had to. And so is that feeling still, again, it's a difficult question, is that still with you, that I wish I'd have done something different?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And
you can tell me shut up and not answer it if you want, because it's
no. Really comfortable with that question, because interesting. I mean, in the process, people have been saying for a while now, Steve, you need to write a book. So to add to everything else I'm doing, I'm in the early stages of writing that book.
Sure.
It's really interesting because I have a working title at the moment called "I Could Have Done." I could have done more. I think that's the title. I just suddenly realised I've forgotten the title of my own book here. But
I could have been an investment banker. I mean, you could. I could have played for Liverpool. I mean, there's.
Yeah, but and it's interesting and the reason why I'm choosing that kind of working title that may become the title is because in my own mind now, I've been able to kind of deal with, if you can call it guilt or whatever you would call it, and could I have done more and all those things. I've been able to square that away now and deal with it by saying, with the level of knowledge and the tools that I had at the time, I did the best that I could. And I'm comfortable with myself now in that. With the level of knowledge that I have now,
right,
I could have done more. And that's why the book's title is quite controversial. I kind of shared this on LinkedIn recently and got polarized views and from families that had lost loved ones. And I said, the whole point of that title is to say, with the knowledge I have now, yes, there are things I would have done differently. But that's why I'm going out to educate and talk to people and say, we do need to know more and understand more, so that you are not faced with what I was faced with 2 years ago, having missed the signs completely that are there.
Yes. And I think when we talk about mental health, men or women, when we talk about the kind of conversations around expressing feelings, about vulnerability, about transparency, about talking about not doing well, I mean, these every day this dialogue is improving, and by your actions in the last 2 and a bit years, you will undoubtedly have moved that on just by sitting talking to me. If one person sees it quite clearly, the resources on your website, and I had a quick look before the call, they're signposting people to practical help and advice. And you know, the simple fact is you can't save everybody, and you can't eliminate this, but I have no doubt what you're doing is going to help a lot of people. And you're always going to have people on LinkedIn who dispute the strategy that you're undertaking, and I'm afraid that's a good thing. It's also can be quite wearing, and no one's an expert. There isn't a silver bullet, but it starts with these, you coming on things like this and opening up the discussion, and that's incredible. And we're lucky to have you on here. So just going on to what you do, like 9 to 5 day to day. Are you full time on this, or are you still working?
Yeah, I wish it was just 9 to 5, Ed. But
9 to 6, 8 to 6.
Yeah, it was.
What's the plan? Tell me the vision of what we're doing.
Yeah.
You're doing.
Yeah. In the early days, I think, the Jordan legacy, it was a response to the request that I was getting for help. So initially it was signposting. That's what it was for. As I was trying to work out my own journey, I was fortunate enough to, through my LinkedIn network, start having lots of really effective conversations. Started to have a conversation with a guy called Paul Vittles, who had moved back from Australia, having lived out there for 15 years and worked extensively in suicide prevention there. And a huge background in change management and consultancy with fairly large organizations, and lives just down the road from me in York now. And we met up and we just had a chat. We kind of hit it off, and he started to talk to me and ask if I was aware of the zero suicide community globally that was out there, and some of the case studies and projects where they effectively implemented what they would call ground up strategies, getting communities involved in workplaces to put practical actions in place to prevent suicide.
Right.
So no, not heard of any of this at all. So I went on this very steep learning curve with Paul's help. And we kind of had further conversations, and then I became very clear at that point, knowing that there is a general set of beliefs out there from those that work in the world of suicide prevention that most suicides are preventable. Not all, but most are. And I think that's something that people can subscribe to.
Is there any data on that? Do you think it's very?
Well, this is one of the issues. There are some really good research studies from people like Professor Rory O'Connor, for example, from the University of Glasgow, and others. One or two very specific case studies, the most famous of which is where the term zero suicide community was coined, is an initiative run in Detroit between 2004 and 2007, I think are the dates, with the Henry Ford clinics over there. And they implemented a number of initiatives, ground up strategies around suicide prevention, increasing awareness and other practical acts, and did move the needle and get suicides of people known to the mental health services there to zero. And that's one of the most famous case studies. Merseycare in the UK have done something very similar. In Australia as well, there have been similar initiatives. So there are, there's a wealth of kind of case studies out there to suggest that, yes, we can prevent most. The term zero suicide is one that doesn't always sit comfortably. And I think just to clarify that point is that we understand that zero is probably not attainable, but it's the simplest target to aim for, because aiming for anything less suggests we're not ambitious.
Correct. Yeah. It's the right target. Absolutely, it's the right target. The strategies that you advise, or the ability, or the strategy of zero suicide, is that what you're following in terms of how you're rolling out your own program?
Yeah, very much. I mean, we've looked at the models out there, and I mentioned about communities and workplaces, but there's a model, a kind of transformational model that we developed, and Paul had particularly come up with, that was based on the principles of what had been working from a practical point of view in other countries.
Yes.
They centered around 4 areas, really. One is what can be done in our communities in terms of practical solutions in schools, sports clubs, bars, chambers of commerce, small businesses, medium-sized businesses. What can we do to put practical action plans in place for business? We'll speak to a company and they'll talk about their well-being program.
Yeah.
And we say, well, do you have a suicide action plan in place?
Yeah.
Go, well, no, we've not, we've not had any suicides. Well, actually, that's the reason why you put them in place, because suicide prevention plans. So, when you start to talk about, what that means in a practical sense and what kind of conversations need to take place within the business and what kind of safeguarding, that's a very different conversation to saying, have you got a well-being strategy in place? So communities is one arm. We then go to bigger workplaces, the larger companies, to look at their whole workplace employee well-being culture, right through to zero suicide plans. We looked at the digital community. How can we work with the digital community in our areas and locations, everything from augmented intelligence to the apps, some of which are already being used in the suicide prevention sector, some of which are transferable technology that could be brought in, that's working well in, say, the construction industry, for example, could be brought in. So we started to have conversations with that community. And the 4th main area was the designing out of the capability of suicide. So there we started to have conversations with construction companies, architects, surveyors.
Have you targeted certain industries or public sector or that are more at risk, more prone? Is it very much around men? Presumably, I think one every 6 minutes there's a male suicide in the country. So are you looking at men and women, or more men?
Yeah, no, we're looking right across the board. Right. I mean, we are aware, 75% of all suicides are male. We know that's the bigger number. We know that men aged 34 to 49 are the highest risk there, and it is the biggest killer of men of that age group as well. So we know that's where we're going to have a lot of conversations. But no, this is right across the board. Again, we're, what are we, 12 to 18 months old in terms of where we're at the moment. And what we've been able to do in that time is run quite a number of online panel discussion conferences around those 4 sectors and engage everything from the police to Network Rail to governments to councils.
Sure.
And kinds of
talk about funding. Who pays for all this activity?
We've been blessed, fortunate, whatever way you call it, and quite strategic in holding out our hand and making sure people know how to donate to us. But so far, we've kind of bootlace this really if they're bootstrapped, it's really been direct donations from companies and individuals.
Have you got any investors? Have you got any corporate sponsors that are flying the flag more than others, or people you want to mention?
Again, we're looking for kind of the bigger sponsors as we go into 2022. We're really looking at a very strong fundraising plan. At the moment we've had companies here and there that have come on board as partners and supported us, and the money's come in, and we're kind of eking out a kind of meager living, but getting by, if you like. Certainly nothing in comparison to my previous consultancy.
No, well, well, I guess you're not in it for floating this on the stock market, are you? It's not really that.
I'm not here to buy a yacht or anything. But on a serious note, again, you asked the question: am I doing this 100% of the time? And I am now. So, all the plans I had for an exit strategy for a previous business and retirement and all those things, just on December the 4th, just changed completely. And we spend every working hour of every day doing this now, and of course we do need to eat and survive. And
this is the thing. I mean, I was involved in some work with Parkinson's, and I had a friend who passed away recently, actually not of Parkinson's, but trying to climb up Everest, and he hadn't been able to work for 10 years because of Parkinson's, and unfortunately his income had dried up, and but yet he was doing incredible adventures and raising awareness and raising money. And I kept saying to him, well, why don't you, you need to tell people, right? You need to live, you got to eat. And it's, you've got to be, it's a business. Ultimately, a charity or non-profit is got to keep the lights on. There's bills, there's expenses, there's people need to pay things. And nobody, I think, is going to abuse that. Certainly, I imagine you more than anyone. So, corporate,
and it's a really important point you made there, Ed, about the business, because again, a conversation we had very early on, given that I come from a business background and Paul did as well. Yeah. We used a phrase very early on that we weren't necessarily comfortable with, but it was, I think, appropriate to use. And we talked about being in the business of suicide prevention.
Yeah.
Because what that allowed us to do was to have those tougher conversations with organizations. I can still be that consultant and that trainer and talk to leaders about what they're not doing and what they should be doing. But I can now add to that my own lived experience. And I think that's the difference. But we know that so many charities, smaller charities, struggle in the early days because they don't pay themselves. And in the end, they can't continue to do the work, and we're of no value to anyone if we can't afford to.
No, if you are struggling personally with finance or the stress of raising money, it's not sustainable as a business, and the business of suicide. And ultimately, a funder should be reasonably sympathetic to that. And I think it's entirely fair and reasonable that to employ people to speak, to go on road shows, to attend conferences, to pay for marketing, to build a website. These things are not free. So, and I totally support that. And it's a conversation we're having with where we take our business. We're a business of male personal development, and we're not a charity. We're not doing it for free. We all have kids and we have livelihoods and businesses, and that's fair, right? I think we're not looking to make a fortune out of this. We're just looking to cover costs. So I think it's a very good point, and I think it's useful for anyone watching to if they are looking to get involved. And I'm sure we can share obviously where they can contact you, whether they're a corporate or indeed an individual. I'm sure there's various fundraising things that you're involved with, and we can leave the details for people obviously to contact you directly on LinkedIn, which I'm sure they can find you just from your name without too much difficulty. Just going back, I guess, to a more sort of personal sort of story, if you like, where when you look at the legacy, is it a question of there isn't an end game to this? Presumably, it's not something you can just go, right, that's enough. So how do you not become obsessed by it, I guess is kind of the...
You're making an assumption I'm not. It's really interesting, my wife and I and a family, we talk about this regularly, and I do get the stern look, when...
You have grandkids and stuff? And
Well, aside from Jordan, I had Danielle, my sister, my daughter, Jordan's elder sister, with two boys, aged 13 and 5. So Jordan's nephews. One of the most wonderful events really was that in September, Danielle joined the team, leaving a role as a teaching assistant. She'd been in for 17 years. And she's now on board. I haven't shared or had this discussion with her, so she might hear this for the first time. But I'd love to think that as I reach that point where I think my energy levels have run out, that she might want to take the helm at some point. So if this is the first time she hears this, it might terrify her.
Hired. You're hired.
but on a serious note, it is wearing, it's exhausting. I'm dealing with people contacting me on a regular basis, as I've just done just before coming on the call, somebody who's just lost their son earlier this month. And,
how do you manage that, Steve, that emotional drain? It's not a drain because you're doing it out of love, but how do you take care of yourself?
Yeah, I think not particularly well up until more recently, probably, because I do go at it and I do invest And I know in the first year, particularly, I kind of take on board almost every contact that came in. And the next thing I know, I'm having a phone call with somebody in the States who's been suicidal, and my wife would look at me at 9 o'clock at night on LinkedIn on my phone, and she said, what are you doing? And I'd just I'd show her the message, and I'd say, what would you do? And she'd go, well, yeah, okay. But I've realized that that's not sustainable.
No.
And I've had to sort of be more disciplined in having contingencies for some of those messages that come in, where, look, we've got some great resources on the website.
Yes.
We're not a crisis site. We're not a helpline. We work strategically with governments, communities, and businesses.
You're more. I'm hearing that you're more about getting companies and organisations to address the risk, rather than, you're not there to take phone calls, unfortunately, from 7 billion people. And you maybe one day you will have a call center with people manning phones, but that's not.
It may happen. We had a conversation earlier today, but you look at LinkedIn that you've mentioned. I think there's somewhere in the region of 44,000 followers that I have, and you can just imagine the kind of the volume of communication that comes into me. And
exactly.
And you don't like to ignore people or fob them off, but sensibly, it's the old adage, isn't it? If you're on a plane and there's a problem, you put your own oxygen mask on first. And,
but is the plan to get not assistance? What's the right word I'm looking for? Are you planning to get people representing the foundation that can pick up, do what you're doing, but divide and conquer?
Yeah, one of the things, again, just to it might be useful just to explain very briefly, the structure of the organisation is as a community interest company. A lot of people listening might not be too familiar with that. It's been around for a few years now, but it's kind of a step into the world of charity by registering a company with Companies House, but it's not a registered charity. There's a lot less admin and paperwork. But there are also some kind of downsides, because you're treated as a company, you pay corporation tax and do those things. So we're in the process of just transferring to a full-blown charity now.
Okay.
With tax benefits. So when that change comes, and with our plans for 2022 now, if you kind of think year one was about raising awareness about the layers of our zero suicide strategy, 2022 is about now going out and saying, right, what are we going to do in a practical sense? Now, with 4 layers of digital, designing out suicide, community, and workplaces, I, and even myself and Paul, can't manage all that.
No.
So we're going to be looking for leads in that area, people that are prepared to kind of champion that. That may well require funding, maybe, to bring them on board as well.
But it's the business case, isn't it? Of course. That's
Definitely. So, without question, I've got to now become the... for years, I used to teach delegation through leadership and management training. I now have to eat my own words and a bit of monkey management and all those things.
Teach the teacher, right? Yeah. I mean, we can all look into this, and I'm sure people will do the reading on the website if they're interested in talking to you about corporate stuff and fundraising. And I think just to go back a little bit to Jordan, I guess, and the a lot of people that are watching this, obviously they're fearful of it happening to someone in their own family. And I have to ask, I mean, that the signs we've talked about, I think we've covered that. What do people look out for? Can they look out for things, and I think people think, well, it's common sense, right? You pick the phone up, but it's not as simple as that. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about, if somebody's concerned about someone and you were talking to them and not me, what, without giving them, psychiatric advice, what would you advocate or suggest?
This is a sort of conversation I have, daily with
all the time,
organizations and groups, and what I've learned now, having become a certified mental health first aider, but also all the other conversations that I've had and what I've learned that I've kind of brought into the mix. I think, first of all, I think there are signs there that someone is struggling, whether there are signs that someone is about to take their own life. It's a really difficult one, because quite often, if we think, very briefly, if we were to kind of put it all into a very small pot and say, what are the reasons someone takes their own life? that can be at a high level broken down into typically a sense of hopelessness, brought about quite often by a sense of feeling trapped at some level, whether that's in a relationship, their career, inside their own heads, whatever it would be. And such is the sense of that entrapment and hopelessness that the mental pain, which is beyond probably anything that we could comprehend if we've not been through that journey, leads someone to believe at that point there is no other way out. But there's a journey to go from what we would call suicidal ideation.
Do you believe this is something that happens over months, if not years, presumably? This is not something you wake up one morning and go, I've had enough, and that's it.
No. In most cases, and there's never an absolute, of course, but all the research, and in most cases, one of the things that we found in Jordan's house after his death was we found journals he'd written over the last 4 or 5 years, which documented his struggles and some of the things he was challenged with. And also there was a reference in 2015 to the fact he'd been researching methods of suicide. So, and we had no idea. So this can go on under the surface for a long time. But to come back to your question, Ed, specifically, what are you looking for? What are the signs that I know now that meant I would have had a different conversation? Well, there's going to be the general signs that people are just not looking after themselves well. They've got possibly poor sleep hygiene. They're not going to bed at regular times. They're tired consistently. They're just not keeping themselves well. They could be speaking slower. They're not as enthusiastic. They're more withdrawn from social and work circles. They may be becoming more absent from work. There's a whole series of signs that would tell you someone's not doing well. Not that they're planning to take their own lives. But what has to happen is that a conversation has to take place. And the conversation that I now coach and is supported by, the professionals out there is that, you ascertain really how concerned you are, first of all. Are the signs that someone's in a crisis, is there real panic and distress and even signs of self-harm there? Or is it just someone that appears to be just kind of struggling and, there's maybe a different conversation? Yeah. I think the conversation is really important. I think asking people how they're doing, we all do this and we all get the stock answer, don't we? So how are you doing, Ed? I'm fine.
Yeah.
Got to ask that question twice.
Yeah.
Got to ask it twice. And you've got to change the intonation the second time. How are you really doing, Ed?
Yeah.
And
no, I mean, I absolutely hear you. And it's so important people listen to that again. Let's stop living in this kind of rather shallow society where people go, how are you doing? Everyone goes, yeah, I'm fine, I'm okay. And if you are close to somebody, go and see them, make some time to have, don't just text them and phone them,
I tell you what, I mean, this is so, I kind of shared a tweet about this yesterday. People might not have recognized that I was kind of aiming it at myself a little bit here, but look, we all have busy lives. I was busy, a busy consultant. I did stuff that I thought might help. We knew Jordan was struggling more than he had done previously during those final weeks. But I was busy.
Yeah.
We all lead busy lives. I think your point about making time is so important. We've just gotta make that time.
Make the time, because you're right, everyone's got everything else to do and they've got their own lives. People are the people are very self-absorbed these days. People live in different geographies than their family because everyone's traveling around, and people are more isolated with tech, and everyone's desperate to sort of leave the home village. And the fabric of society is,
we can all take a leaf, and I know he's my son, but we can all take a leaf out of Jordan's book. As I said, he's the guy when one of his best mates, his wife, died of a brain tumor. Jordan was straight in the car from Yorkshire driving down south to be with him and his daughter. He was the guy that, if you were out, and his mates have told me this, out on a Saturday night out in Newcastle for a few beers with the lads, where's Jordan? So he's talking to a homeless guy.
Brilliant
over there. I've got to be careful. I would say we've all got to be a bit more Jordan at times.
Yeah. Well, what a legacy, right? What a legacy. And I think for men, this idea that the ability to communicate on an emotional level with people that it takes a vulnerable step to really open up to another man or even your wife or your partner. And we're trying to totally remove that idea, to make it totally normal to say, you know, I'm not having a good day. I'm not doing well. And I need to talk at you, or I need to talk with you. Yeah. And yes, everybody is talking about mental health, but it's fine to post something on Instagram. But for individuals, you know, we all have a social and moral responsibility, if we love people, if we care about people, to actually ask that question twice and make some time and mean it. And I think that's just a way. It's like going to the gym. It's just a way of being more empathetic. Is that the right word?
I think empathic is the right. I struggle with that one myself, to be honest, but I think it's empathic. And what I'll go with anyway.
Yeah, okay, we'll go with that. I think people will get it. But we're all guilty of running past people that maybe we've thought we could have done a bit more, and we, you know, you can't do everything for everyone, but certainly immediate family relationships, there is a time to check in, and rather than just go down the pub and talk a load of bollocks about rubbish, actually have proper conversations. And we don't all want to be talking deep every conversation, and I think it's normalizing, you know, how are you doing, well, I'm feeling like this, you know, and it's not again, I think about this a lot, and it's not about me, of course, but I think about there has to be ultimately, yes, you can express your feelings, and I work like a lot of men on what's the solution to your feelings. Well, actually, if you're down, and there isn't a solution. The solution is verbalizing it, and when people don't verbalize emotions, they stay in your body, and I really strongly believe they have to come out somehow. So they come out physically, they come out with poor mental health, or in some situations they come out through addiction, through self-sabotage, and in the worst case scenario is suicide, or physical abuse, or so it all needs to come out somehow. And
I think your analogy of the you know, going out for a beer and the lads, really, you know, I've got so many anecdotal stories that suddenly come to mind when I have these conversations. But you know, I remember chatting with a guy the other day, and he said, you know, not that long ago, he was out with a few mates, and one of the mates was kind of a little bit low, and they'd had a few beers, and he kind of just said something like, well, you know, why don't we just do it? Why don't we just do it? I mean, to do what? Why don't we just end it all? What are you talking about? He said, well, look, life's just not worth living, is it? And, you know, they'd all had a few beers. And this guy was chatting to me. He said, you know what? It could have been really easy just to put that down to where he's just talking garbage and bollocks because we're out having a beer. He said, so I phoned him the next morning. And said, what was that all about? He said to his mate, what he said, and the guy just burst into tears and opened up. And it would have been really easy, wouldn't it, for them to go, it's just Jim or Fred or whatever, he's had a few beers, just talking nonsense. But this guy had the presence of mind to phone his mate the next day and go, hey, come on, what's going on here? What was all that about?
And I think that's another anecdote. It's another example. We don't need to drink, right, to talk. And we've got to be able to go for a walk, have a cup of tea. You know, it doesn't have to be around, you know, men can only talk about stuff when you've had 6 pints, and it's normalizing these kind, like women do probably better than we do, and making it just, you know, acceptable. And there is absolutely no stigma to it, because what we know is that if people don't do that, it's not going to end well. And as I said, it either ends in more and more drinking or more poor behavior. And so
I think it is improving, Ed. I think we are, you know, we've got likes over here of Andy's Man's Club, for example, that is just growing exponentially, just incredible. And they say, look, we're just a place where a bunch of blokes can come together. You don't have to book, and we sit and talk. And that's the whole premise of what Andy's Man's Club does. And, you know, I can't remember just how many places they've opened. It's got to be around about 50 or 60 in the UK now. And
I've come across them. We'll certainly try and talk to them. And this is fantastic.
I would definitely get in touch with either Luke Ambler there, or Andy Greenaway. Good people. They're you know, they're now the kind of go-to men's organisation that the kind of professionals will refer to as well. So
brilliant.
Incredible job.
We've got to promote these groups. So, I mean, anything else you'd like to add in terms of maybe someone that's listening to this that's worried about someone? Anything else you want to add on on things you can do. I mean, obviously there's a lot of resources that people can tap into in terms of chat lines and stuff. They're all on your website, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've got lots of resources on the help menu and lots of drop-down menus, if you've seen, relating to different aspects of mental health and suicide. Because I mean, we should mention, of course, that although the majority of suicides are as a result of poor mental health, not all of them are, of course.
Yeah.
So take a look at those. Sometimes when you're confused, it's really difficult to know where to go for help, and that's one of the challenges. And there's almost too many places sometimes when you Google, so we know that's a challenge. I think kind of on a kind of final point, really about supporting people, and we talked about kind of asking someone how they're doing. I think what's absolutely crucial is that and these are people I've spoken to who've been in crisis and in situations. We know that they're suffering this incredible pain, but interestingly, when they talk with somebody, what they don't necessarily want is someone to go in and fix them, because A, they don't believe they're fixable, and most times that person isn't equipped to do that anyway. What they do want is you to listen without any kind of judgment as well. And I remember a conversation I had with a guy in his 50s, very successful marketing guy, and I know him well. He was having a particularly bad time, and his partner was on the phone to the NHS trying to get some help and kind of not getting anywhere. And I just said, to him, I said, just what is it you kind of need at moments like this from someone? And Jesus, he said, I just need someone to sit down with me, hold my hand, listen to me without any judgment, and kind of tell me it'll be all right. And I get emotional every time I think about that conversation I had with him, a few months ago. And that's kind of what we got to do. Yeah. Really. And look, we can all do. We don't need to be qualified as a mental health expert or anything. We can all do that a little bit better. Yeah. I think.
Maybe stop trying to fix and judge and just listen to people that have asked to be listened to. And I think we all struggle to listen sometimes, don't we?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, I can see the emotion, and it's a very complex topic, but at the same time, we're all doing our best. And I think the advice of checking in, of listening, of making time, of taking proper resources, of getting professional help. I think I'm a big fan of therapy and counselling, and that's got to be something that I think anyone who's depressed should possibly look at. GPs, refer if they're willing to take that step, is go to the professionals. And I think we're all a bit wary of, if people are depressed, I think people go, oh, well, I'm not qualified to deal with this, because you are. And I think it's pretty tough to imagine a friend or someone in the family who's reached that level when you're thinking this is serious, right? This person is not doing well, and all you want to do is say that you've got, talking to people is fine, but at what point does proper medical help need to be, like interventions, for example? Or, I mean, how bad do things get before you say, I'm really, really concerned?
Well, I think the obvious one is obviously potential risk to life. If you see a situation there, and, you've got the obvious things, someone with a bottle of medication standing by a bridge, those obvious signs there. But I think, and it is about the stigma that 1 in 4 people in the UK experience a mental health problem every single year. So you are not unique if you're going through this. So let's get that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's normal.
You're not some kind of weirdo or anything. You're actually making up a quarter of the population here.
Right. I've been there.
Yeah. So, what's the medical criteria? The medical criteria is if I am displaying excessive symptoms of stress or depression or anxiety, and it's starting to affect my day-to-day life and interactions and work and all these things, and that's been continuing for a period of more than 2 weeks.
Yes.
Time for help. Time for a conversation.
Sorry, I should have turned my notifications off. Yeah. So, and is that something that if anybody is seeing that and observing that if it's ongoing beyond a week, a couple of weeks, then what would you advise people to do if they have concerns beyond and above checking in?
At that point, it is about having the conversation, and it's one of the things I coach through the workshops that I run. But very briefly, that conversation is about telling the person what you've noticed, what you've observed.
Yeah.
Be really specific as well. Don't just say you don't seem to be doing too well, Ed.
Okay.
What have you seen? Is it lack of sleep, too many booze bottles in the recycling, coming in late for work?
Okay.
What is the evidence?
Okay.
What is the impact you're seeing that having on either themselves, you, or anyone around them?
That's
if you're
brilliant.
really clear,
brilliant advice.
It's very difficult to argue.
Yes.
From there, it's look, what can we do? How can I help you? And just tell me what's going on for you. And there's a really great framework called TED, TED.
Okay.
Okay. Tell me what's going on for you at the moment. Explain to me what it feels like and what's happening to you. Describe to me what's going on specifically.
Brilliant.
For you. Just TED, really great framework. And from there, you know, you need kind of yourself to know what the exit strategy is, coming back to a point you said earlier. And that is, I can listen, I can take on board. I think you need help and support.
Sure.
So what you've then got to do is make sure that you're equipped if you're going to have that conversation and know where you're going to signpost them to. Is it the GP? Is it an Andy's Man's Club? Is it what kind of, don't go into fix, but go in prepared.
Yes.
Knowing that if you reach that point, you've got some solutions that you could suggest.
Okay. That's fantastic.
Really important.
Yeah, it's fantastic advice. I think there is a process here of knowing what your output of that conversation is, listening, but actually then having an ability to go with practical advice. And I think also there's going to be some tension there about, is that other person willing to make some commitments to getting some help? Because it's going to put a lot of anxiety and stress onto you as a helper or someone that's concerned to sit in the maybe. And that's quite stressful for anyone, I think, dealing with someone who's depressed. So, I think it's challenging, but at least if you offer the support and the call to action is there, the information is there, even if you have to print it out, write it down, and at least.
And I think just one thing to add to that, Ed, as well, because I think you're right. I think you've got to go in fairly confidently with this conversation,
right.
Not be prepared for someone just to kind of fob you off. And that can be difficult. I understand there's friendships involved. Jordan was quite resistant at times, but you're talking about saving a life here.
Yes.
And my suggestion would be that if you've recommended a GP or A&E or whatever it might be, depending on the level of concern, get that commitment from the person. Are you going to contact your GP? Yeah, okay, Steve, I'll do it. When are you going to do that?
Tough love, right? Tough love.
When are you going to do that? I'll give them a call at 5 tonight. Brilliant. Okay, I'll call you this tonight. Yeah. I'll call in with you, check how you're doing, and just see if you've made that call. Yeah. We have that responsibility to follow through to that level before it goes to the professionals. I think that's really important.
I think that's incredible advice, and leave nothing important unsaid, and action it, and be firm, and stand up, and you are responsible to a degree for getting some action there, because otherwise, if it's just left in the maybe, it's not great for anyone, particularly.
Yeah. So again, none of this is an exact science. You're going to have all kinds of different situations. So we're looking at the best case scenarios here, really.
Yeah, I mean, I've picked up also. I mean, there are things you can obviously, the certified mental health certificate you can do through work, through your council. I noticed Staffordshire Council, where I'm at the moment, are offering suicide prevention. I think through the Chambers of Commerce. So and they're funding that, and I've signed up for that and put a few people in touch with that. So
excellent.
We can all sort of become a bit better equipped at trying to help in many ways. So that's something we can share again, and we'll promote that through Blue Mind. But I think that's kind of, I guess, all I had to probe and ask, and I hope I haven't been too intrusive, but I think you...
No, not at all, Ed. No, enjoyed the, well, you say enjoyed the, it's always an odd thing to say, isn't it? I enjoyed the conversation, given what the subject is about. Well, but it has been a conversation, and it's really important, and I hope it's been of some value to those, the listeners that you have there as well.
It's been incredibly valuable to me personally, and I will take this information forward as best I can to educate people as best we can. And I think your courage and your love is incredible, and I think it comes through to so many people that if we could take away just a little bit of what you have to go through, I think a lot of people would. And we send you a lot of love, and we're happy to help. And it's been a pleasure talking to you, Steve. It really has. And
thank you, Ed. Appreciate it.
I hope if Jordan is up there, we'll have a toast for him, a glass of water later maybe, and I'm sure he's looking down, smiling. So God bless him, and thank you very much. Thank you so much. Okay, well, I'll see you soon.
All the best. Take care.